So, greetings, hello, it's Dr Thomas Daffern here again for my Sunday broadcast, really, for peace and justice in the world. And last week I spoke to Her Majesty the Queen, and we had a very deep, heartfelt conversation about what's going on in the world, how we can put our minds together to help the UK play its own creative and positive role in making peace. And this week, unfortunately, some rather terrible events have happened in the last few days, which have culminated in a real tension in the world that no doubt many people will be aware of, especially between Iran and the USA. Now, this is impacting on world affairs. There's a horrendous danger that, a major war could break out because the USA has targeted and killed a senior Iranian general who was helping the forces of Iraq and Syria and so on fight back against the most extreme and pernicious forms of Islamic terrorism in the form of ISIL. And he was quite successful in this. He was a Shia, he was a believer in really a sort of rational form of Islam, premised on the Shia traditions, which I've studied for many years. And he was appalled, like so many other people, at the horrors that these ISIL people had done, like burning people alive, beheading people, their atrocities against Shias in the wars in Syria and also inside Iraq have been documented and fully horrendous. And also against Christians. The ISIL types in Iraq have tried to destroy, erase Christianity from one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. And the same in Syria. And they were doing merciless persecutions. So this chap had been trying to rally the forces of resistance against this extremism, was very successful. So why on earth had the Americans targeted him and destroyed him? This is a thing that I think many intelligent people around the world will be asking, because it doesn't look good for America's integrity as a great power. I mean, power is a very terrible thing, as St. Paul said. Somebody's got to have the power, but you've really got to be careful about how you wield it. And to do this kind of targeted killing, most commentators and legal professors in America are saying what Trump did was illegal. Quaseem Suleiman, who lived from 1957 to 2020 and was killed on the 3rd of January, just a couple of days ago, had been actually trying to help the forces of moderation in building a civilized Middle East with respect and tolerance for different religions. Now, one of the things that's often not known, and because I'm a student of Middle Eastern society, I read part of my degree in history at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. I've travelled a great deal in the world. I've met people from all backgrounds. There are things about Iran that we're not told in the conventional newspapers or media sources. And that's something that I find absolutely incredible, is this demonization of Iran that's been going on since Khomeini's Islamic Revolution, essentially, since 1979. I was in Canada at the time studying world philosophy and history, and I'd just finished reading the entire Quran. As a scholar, I approached it as a philosopher. And like Goethe, I found incredible things in the Quran that made me sit up and think, well, this is very interesting. This is a revelatory text. And exactly like Goethe, I started a serious study of Islam, which I've carried on with the rest of my life. I'm still now doing a commentary in depth on the Quran. And I studied in depth Shia teachings as well as Sunni teachings, as well as Ismaili and Sufi teachings. I was influenced by scholars like Henry Corbin and Syed Hussein Nasr, who I also met once. I think probably the greatest Iranian philosopher. an expert on the history of Shiism, who happens to be teaching in Harvard. But he's someone who worked at very senior level inside Iran. He ran the Tehran Academy of Philosophy. Now, under the Shah, that was. Sadly, of course, he left after the revolution, but he couldn't be accused of being anti-Shia. And nor could I, and nor could any real intellectual, I think, who studied world philosophy and world history and Islam. Now, unfortunately, the attack on Quaseem Suleiman, which precipitates this possibility of a world conflict between the Muslim forces of Iran and their Shia fellows scattered throughout the world, they've now raised this red flag of absolute war, the flag of Hussein, the martyr of Karbala, as a symbolic war, struggle, a jihad against everything the USA stands for and its ignorance, and particularly against Trump. Well, I'm going to take on a very difficult task shortly. I'm going to be speaking by phone to both Donald Trump, President of the US, and Hossein Rouhani, who is the President of Iran, and I'm going to be trying to organise a mediation with them. I pre-booked a call. I'm going to first talk to one of them. I think I'm going to talk to the Iranian first. That's what's been planned. And have a one-to-one. And then I'm going to talk to Trump and have a one-to-one. I'm going to then talk to them both, try and bring them together on a sort of party line. Now, this is intending, hopefully, as a precursor to a face-to-face mediation. I'm going to suggest they come to France, to Paris. It's a city that, welcomes discourse and intellectual dialogue. As a background, I should explain I've set up and run the only multi-faith mediation service in the world, still to this day. It's completely ridiculous. I set it up in '95 with trainings at Oxford, at the Abbey and Sutton Courtenay was our first training. Following a conference I attended in the Vatican as Secretary General of the World Conference on Religion and Peace. That's now been rebranded Religions for Peace, but I prefer the old title. I was Secretary General of that in the UK and Ireland for nearly 10 years, and during this time I attended an awful lot of interfaith conferences, including this one in the Vatican and in Riva del Garda in the north of Italy. And it went off in my head like a light. We need a multi-faith mediation service to solve religious conflicts in the world. This is the time when the early Balkan Wars were starting, when the Middle East conflict showed no sign of abating, and it was when the conflict in Northern Ireland was still going on, bombs going off everywhere. Even close to where I was teaching at Kingsley Hall in the East End of London, a bomb went off, and you could hear it rattling the windows in Docklands. So I said, well, who's solving these religious conflicts then? And I was an interfaith leader, so I said, well, we've got to do it, haven't we? Like a little child, with the enthusiasm that youth brings, I said, well, let's set one up then. And I got a number of volunteers who were representatives of their respective faith traditions, and set up the Multifaith, Multicultural Mediation Service, which then took on cases, and it's still going. I then wrote up the thinking behind it and the formation and the process for my PhD thesis at the University of London. And it led me to meet all kinds of scholars, academics and peace thinkers, and faith leaders around the world. The founding conference of the World Conference on Religion and Peace, which gave me the idea, we had Pope John Paul II speaking, we had other faith leaders of that stature. It was an extremely moving thing, which I've written about in my autobiography. You can read this up. So I'm not here to go into huge detail on that. You can study it, and it's published in my thesis. But I would say that this is the background to which I'm bringing to this conversation that's about to happen. I feel in moral duty to do my best to prevent this ridiculous World War III happening. To me, this is like a playground scrap between... We have Trump, who's a Presbyterian Christian, apparently, and we have Rouhani, who's a very sophisticated Shia, actually, highly educated, a religious scholar. I'm going to appeal to their common humanity, their common love of spirituality, their common love of God, however we conceive that to be. And I'm going to just pray that the gods, the Great Spirit, however you want to define that, can bring about a miracle here. I've just got back from India, where I had this amazing peace conference with the Jains, and there was a lovely Russian woman there who used to keep calling me the Miracle Man, which I thought was such a sweet little gesture. I mean, how she would know that, I don't know, but if I can pull off peace and prevent World War III, my dear, yes, I am a Miracle Man. But you might have to help me, being Russian. You know, I think we need Putin's help here. So look, this is what I'm up to, and I'm going to get on with it. It's quite important. So thank you for listening, and I hope let's pray for success during this this next period of time. Right. So I'm going to call, as I said, first I'm going to call Hassan Rouhani, the president of Iran, who is quite an extraordinary, highly educated individual, and I've never actually spoken to him in person before, so this is quite important. Hello, yes. Yes, that's right. Yeah, greetings. Thank you so much. We agreed I'd phone this number at this time. Yes, it's Dr. Thomas Daffern here. I have a call booked with President Hassan Rouhani, and I'd be delighted if you could put me through. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, yes, hello, greetings. Is that Hassan Rouhani? Okay, and thank you so much. I can speak in English. I'm afraid my Iranian is very, is very rusty, limited to a few words. So, bless you, thank you so much. Yes, I know you're very busy, and I know that, yeah, with some reluctance you agreed to take this call. I'm aware that you're contemplating very serious military responses to this unbelievable attack on the integrity of your nation, yes. And I want to start actually by giving my sincere condolences for the murder of your military commander, General Quaseem Suleiman. Yeah, it must have been an unbelievable shock to you and to many of all the people of Iran. I notice he was born just around the same time I was, so we're similar kind of age bracket. Yeah, I send my condolences as just a human being, really. Although I've never chosen the path of warfare and militarism. And I'm a peace activist. By contrary, I suppose that I'm considered by some to be like a kind of general in the peace movement. And so I honour generals. I've met quite a few generals, actually, in my life, who've been campaigning for peace. Yes, General Brigadier Harbottle, I don't know if you knew of him, set up a group of generals for peace. Yeah, that was back during the height of the Cold War in the 1980s, when him and I were working, that's right, to prevent the Cold War erupting into a Third World War, like a nuclear war, then between Russia and America. Generals have an overview of things, don't they? They can see the general issues, and that's why somebody's called a general. It means they have a general overview. A soldier down at the grassroots just sees what's going on in front of their immediate patch of battle. Yeah. So generals are people endowed with oversight, if you want. And I'm sure Quaseem was one of those, and therefore will be, greatly missed. And I'm sure that deep down he wanted peace. If only he was still alive, we could have restarted this Generals for Peace group. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe there are other generals in the Iranian forces that would be able to engage in peace dialogue with generals from other countries, like Russia and China and Britain and France and America, hopefully, God willing. There are some good military types, even in America. Yeah, real generals I'm talking about. I mean, I've met serious generals who came out for peace. Because a true general knows that the best way to win a war is to avoid it happening. And that way you share the victory 50-50 with your potential enemy, instead of both being defeated. Yes, in any major war, everybody loses, that's right. Above all, the civilians nowadays. Yes, and I know Quaseem was active during the Iran-Iraq war, which was a complete ridiculous catastrophe, wasn't it? From 1982, I think, to 1988, and hundreds of thousands of people died, innocent people. Saddam Hussein was mad to start that. Unbelievable, yeah. I don't know, it's crazy that then the Americans turned on him, having egged him into attacking you. Such is the perfidy of untrained diplomats. Yes. I'm aware of your studies, and I want to congratulate you on your dedication to education. I think, like you, I'm also a scholar. And we also have a connection with Scotland. Yes, your PhD and your Masters came from the Glasgow Caledonian University, didn't it? I know it well. I've lectured there myself years ago. And that's right. I know Glasgow University itself better, but I do know the Glasgow Caledonian University. Yeah, and like you, I love Scotland. I lived there for 7 years and based my Peace Institute there. Yeah, on Loch Goyle. I don't know if you ever went there. It's, yes, in Argyll. You did go there, yes, for a holiday. Yeah, no, it's a great place. And I began my commentary actually on the Quran whilst I was studying in Scotland. And that's right, I'm doing a commentary on the Quran, yeah, in English. No, I assure you, I'm looking at all the sources, all the commentaries that exist that I can access. Yeah, and I'm looking from a Shia as well as a Sunni, as well as a Sufi and, Ismaili and philosophical perspective. You see, you have to understand what I am is essentially a philosopher of religions. I'm like a general, so I'm an expert in the totality of the universality of philosophical traditions on the planet. Okay, I will try and speak a bit slower. So I'm like a general is in the military world. I am in the philosophical world. I'm a general in that I see the generic connections between all the philosophical traditions of humanity. Yeah, so I'm interested in the core common truths that exist between all faiths. And I think I've mapped them out. I mean, I've been working on this for 40 years, ever since I first started reading seriously when I was a young man in my early 20s, comparative philosophy of religion. Yeah, that's when I read the Quran for the first time. I was utterly blown away. I mean, what an incredible text. And we were never taught this in my educational upbringing. We weren't even asked to read the Bible. I mean, it was just RE lessons were a joke. Later, I became an RE teacher, and I at least made all my kids read at least one gospel. And I would go through with them all the other sacred texts. I would explain about the Quran. We'd read the odd surah and stuff. Yes. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's why I've offered to mediate here, okay? I mean, my formal offer of mediation is because I run this thing called the Multifaith, Multicultural Mediation Service, which I sent to your secretaries. They've examined into it. Yeah, I set this up in 95 after a meeting in Italy, in Rome. I was working, that's right, at an interfaith conference. Yeah, the Pope was there, but so were many, many Muslim scholars of great stature and great renown. Yes, I'm not sure if... I don't think anyone from Iran came, unfortunately. It wasn't in my power to invite people, but I've always reached out to, when I worked in London at the university, I was always reaching out to the Centre for Shia Studies as well as the Sunni institutions like the mosque, yeah. That's right, the mosque in Regent's Park, yeah. Yeah, and I taught, you see, at the Muslim College in London. I don't know if you ever visited. You should have done. I'm sure they would have been delighted. Did you know Dr. Zaki Badawi? Yeah, he was my friend and mentor and colleague, a great scholar. Yeah, he did his degree, that's right, at Al-Azhar University. on Islamic philosophy and reform movements, actually, in the 19th, 20th centuries. Yeah, he was Egyptian, but you see, as you know, Al-Azhar University was founded by the Fatimid dynasty, who were part Shia. Ha! That's right. You see, so that's right. Scholarly Muslims know that in God there's no distinctions between Shia and Sunni and all these other words, Sufi, Ismaili. You know, these words are just like vehicles to get across the illusion of what the Hindus call Maya, to get to God. They're doorways, yes. I've read about your studies, sir, and I'm going to take my hat off to you for your dedication over the years, because you're not only a Shiite cleric, but you're also an expert in law, in fiqh, in Islamic law and jurisprudence. That's right, and that was what your PhD was on in Glasgow. So you understand, I mean, in a way that I'm merely an amateur. Law is something I've never studied in vast detail, but I'm fascinated by the history of law. Yeah, I've always been more interested in the philosophical studies of justice. I'm with Kant more, and the philosophical tradition that says justice is a divine quality. Well, of course Islam knows that. And yes, of course, that's the great tragedy at the heart of the Shia-Sunni split. You know, where is justice when the Shias are being mown down at Karbala? Where was justice? Why was God on the side of the oppressor? Yeah, and when later imams were being poisoned, some even by their wives, yes. Yes, where is the God of justice? That is the question. Yeah, and that's what, you know, where was the God of justice when Quaseem Soleimani was killed? Yeah. Is God in favour of the, you know, violent ones who commit these atrocities? Well, I don't think so, and I think you don't either. We know that, but then we have to be clever. We have to have what Hegel called the cunning of reason. Yeah. Did you look at Hegel at all in your studies? Okay, you looked at his philosophy of right. Well, of course you would. He's a lawyer. He was a legal thinker. A great. Yeah, I love Hegel. I mean, absolutely. And yeah, he didn't know quite enough about Islam, really. It's a shame I don't think he properly read the Quran. Goethe did. Goethe did, yes, of course. And he wrote those wonderful poems, the East-West Divan and so on. Yeah, Goethe is a great figure. He pops up in my commentary on the Quran. There were various synchronicities about that. But Hegel had an intuitive grasp of what Islam represents, and I think he wanted to transfer that in a language that would become universalized. He kind of part succeeded and part failed, and you know, the implications of that have been going on ever since. Yes, so that's really my work as a philosopher, is to try and explain the difficulties that have been left in the wake of our inability to actualize the cunning of reason. So people keep, each generation, having these ignorance wars. We are ignorant of reason. We don't listen to the messages. We don't interpret them. Even if we claim to be a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim, we don't fully actualize the text in front of us. So that's why I'm doing commentaries on them all, to try and say to people, look, here's the manual. This is the manual for humanity. Try and actualize it. Yes, I have. I visited all over different parts of the world, Israel, Palestine, several times. I've been to India many times, many parts of India. Yeah, I love the old Mughal parts. I've been into mosques all over India, and Turkey, I adore Turkey. You can't see me, but I'm wearing a wonderful Turkish hat that I bought it there. I've been to Konya, where Rumi's buried. Yeah, you've been as well. Yes, well, everyone should go to Rumi's tomb. Yes. And I've been to Morocco, which is another amazing culture. So, but I mean, I would love to go to them all. I'd love to go on pilgrimage one day to Medina, and if I can be allowed to go to Mecca as a philosophical Goethean kind of Sufi, then if they'll have me in. Wouldn't that be nice? Yes. I've always wanted, actually, that's right, an Islamic Institute of Peace Studies in Mecca, with a branch of Medina, where they focus just on Islamic studies about peace. Yeah, looking at the works of great thinkers like Ibn Arabi or Ibn Rushd or Ibn Sina or Mullah Sadra. Yes, Mullah Sadra, I know. He's one of my great heroes intellectually. Yes, you studied him when you studied at Com, did you? Yeah, Mullah Sadra, he okay, so I've done a book called Being and Knowledge, which is my magnum opus. It's do you know about Duns Scotus, a Scottish philosopher? No, you've not heard of him. Well, he was he was the alternative to Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages of Christian. Yeah, when Ibn Arabi and the great saints of Islam were doing their thing. So in Europe we had a few intellectuals, and there were two in particular, Duns Scotus and Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas is the one that won the prizes. He got all the accolades, was made a saint. And he said you could think your way to God rationally. Yeah, you could work it out in your mind, yeah. And he wrote these amazing texts explaining how you can come up with Christianity's God as the answer to everything, yeah. Okay, and then there was an alternative thinker called Duns Scotus, who was from Scotland, where I lived and where you did your PhD. And what Duns Scotus said is, no, you can't just think your way to God. It's not. If it was that easy, we would have all done it. No, you had to orientate your beingness towards God. Your heart, your emotional, your spiritual life, the wholeness of your being. Yeah. It was like an ontology of enlightenment that Duns Scotus said. He was a Franciscan who were more, let's say, devotional than the Dominicans. Aquinas was a Dominican, they were clever types. Now, Duns Scotus was he was a model for later Christian thinkers, and Heidegger, you must have heard of him. Yeah, he did his PhD on Duns Scotus. Yeah, and then he wrote Being and Time. Okay, yeah, we're on the same. Yeah, and Mullah Sadra was the Islamic equivalent of Duns Scotus, you see, the ontologist. Yeah, the levels of being, that's right. Yeah, you see, war, violence, is really a perturbation. It's a disturbance in the integrity of being itself. And a vast World War III type outbreak, which God knows America might be plotting, and that's why I'm, talking to you now. I mean, I don't know if they're that crazy, but my fear is they might be, I'm trying to head that off. I don't want World War III because my commitment, like Duns Scotus, like Mullah Sadra, is to being itself. God is being. If you love God, you love being. That's why we love life, isn't it? We love our children, our wife, our sponsors, our patrons, our friends, our students, our, everyone on the planet, every mountain, as Rumi said, every tree. Yeah. Gosh, so look, we're on the same hymn sheet here. So, yeah, and that's why I have also, I published this journal on love, because what is love? Well, yeah. Yes, so I'd love my Institute of, Islamic Peace Studies, if it could focus on the nature of love in Islamic thought, how we can love God, how we can love the divine, the beloved, according to Islamic thought, according to Muhammad. Muhammad was a great lover of life, wasn't he? He had so many experiences, so many amazing adventures that are written about him. So many beloveds, he kept falling in love, Yes, I mean, what a great lover of life. And that's why Goethe loved him so much, I think. Yes, so, okay. And can I also just say, and thank you so much for listening. I know your people are trying to get you, off the phone, but is that what the clicks are? Okay. Just hang in there. This is important. Let me just say I'm also speaking on behalf of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East. That's right, which I'm chair of. Yeah, and you can, research that. I'll send you details. Was set up to do what it says on the tin, to try and bring truth and reconciliation to the Middle East. I know it's a bit of a long job. It was set up back in 2006, I think. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, and as an offshoot of that, I have to say I've set up more recently an International Historical Commission of Inquiry into 9/11 because those tragic events of 2001, the 11th of September 2001, yeah, they were horrendous, that attack. And yeah, at first I believed the official narrative of the Bush president. I know, but then after a while I researched it, I went into enormous detail, I watched, huge number of films, documentaries, read lots of books and interviewed people. Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that as an academic historian, yes, I've written the only history of the events of 9/11 with an absolute forensic detail, 2 volumes, 1,000 pages. Yeah, I suspend judgment. I don't know who did it. But I think what I do know, and I think you will probably agree, is that the official narrative doesn't make sense. 19 Al-Qaeda affiliated people run by bin Laden managed to destroy 3 vast buildings in New York and attack the Pentagon just with a few little knives smuggled onto planes. Yeah, no, I mean, that's right. I mean, my book, which I'd love you to translate into Persian, by the way, and Arabic, and get some, Muslim historians working on it. That's right. Yes, yes, it puts forward about 20 different hypotheses as to what could have caused 9/11's tragedy. And yeah, I mean, that's right. One of them is the official hypothesis of the Bush dynasty, but I think that is dismissible through lots of evidential trails. And there are other kinds of possible... Yes, I was absolutely shocked when I read that Vice President Pence claimed that this man, your Quaseem, was somehow involved in 9/11. I mean, unbelievable they're still peddling that nonsense. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So anyway, that's why I've set up this Truth Commission, this historical commission. And the idea is to get proper, bona fide, trained historians from all over the world to sit on this historical commission. We'll be meeting on 9/11 in 2020. Yes, in The Hague, and I would like to invite you to nominate the 2 most qualified experts in historical science in Iran. They must be at least PhDs, doctorates in history. They must have expertise in 20th century history. Yeah, I'm afraid they're going to have to speak English as well as Persian, but yeah, I apologise. Well, you're pretty fluent, so... Yes, and I also would invite you to nominate others as backups. But the point is, okay, we can't have a pre-confirmed hypothesis as to what caused 9/11. This is an objective, bona fide academic commission to use historical research, yeah. And so before, we appoint the professors to the commission, we need to make sure they're not coming on it because they think whatever, they're convinced Israel did it, or they're convinced Russia did it, or they're convinced Al-Qaeda did it. Yes, it was Aristotle who said that the mark of an educated mind is to hold a hypothesis without giving assent to it. I love that quote, yeah. Yeah, yes. Well, Aristotle was quite a clever chap. Yeah, I'm sorry that his protege went slightly AWOL and destroyed Persian civilization for a while, but it bounced back, didn't it? And yes, isn't it ironic that it was conflict between the West and Persia that gave rise to history? Herodotus. Yeah, I read him for my A-level in ancient history. I've always respected the Persian culture. I mean, I remember when reading about the Persian culture in Herodotus, I always felt this is a very ancient and noble civilization. Yeah, and the way that you then adapted from Zoroastrianism, you adapted to Islam, but Islam with a depth, with that Zoroastrian tinge to it. Yeah, Surawadi and all those great thinkers. Yeah, it was a kind of Gnostic type of